Charlie. It's been somewhat of a relief, this pause in hostilities over the weekend, a huge relief. Obviously, we've seen the pictures of families being reunited, which have been very beautiful. But all of those stories, some of them are quite sort of touched with sadness as well, because some of those children who are being released, their parents are not there to meet them.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, so many orphans, families reunited. Many of them, of course, immediately rushed to hospital because they've been kept in such austere and punishing conditions. Yesterday, I spoke to the family of Maya Regev. When we were in Israel, we met her mother. She was hoping that her children would be released. Just one of them has now. Maya was rushed to hospital for urgent surgery on her leg, which was threatened with amputation due to an infection. A gunshot wound suffered on October the 7th and being kept in such poor medical care for that period. Now, the family expressed some joy that Maya was back, but their son, Itai, a fighting-age male, as the Gazans would see him, being kept behind. And so they are releasing, so far, women and children first, and they're retaining what the Gazans and Hamas would feel as high-value hostages are still being retained. So it was interesting last night, I thought, that they released a joint Israeli-American civilian. That 4-year-old girl was one of those that they released. A sort of sign, perhaps, towards Joe Biden that they could release more American hostages, showing that keep the pressure up, Washington, and we'll extend the ceasefire and give you more. Because they hold 20 Americans. Those are the real bankers for Hamas. That is keeping this truce open so far. And it seems that all parties want this truce to be extended, which is very fragile. And even Israel has said that they'd be happy to do it if they could extend it by a day, if 10 more were released. But that Israeli message also kind of quietly tainted with the statement that they are willing to continue their fight for victory. Netanyahu, inside Gaza Strip, the first Israeli leader inside the Strip since 2005, stood on a tank in military fatigues. This is not the most peaceful ceasefire you could think of. You can be sure that the IDF right now is developing its intelligence products, rearming, re-preparing, and getting set to go again, and what will almost certainly be a devastating second phase of this conflict.
Likewise, Hamas, the same, Charlie, because they've been... They've suffered a series of punishing military blows, but they too can now be regrouping in their tunnels. Absolutely,
it's an area of two layers. A civilian layer on the top and a military layer underneath that subterranean labyrinth where terrorists gather. Now, the Israeli military fought armoured divisions in the north to seize Gaza City and North Gaza, but it's almost certainly the case that some Hamas fighters remain in the north. That won't be an entirely secure ground as they look to move south. And those fighters, we know that they will remove their military fatigues as they head south. They will blend into the civilian populace and re-emerge as and when they are required to inflict punishment onto the IDF. And so that next phase will be brutal, especially as there are 2 million civilians in the south. That is severely restricted terrain. And we have seen, I think, the IDF almost flying blind in its approach to civilians in the Gaza Strip. They don't really have a strategy for dealing with them.
Hamas don't care about their own civilians.
Well, there we go. They're happy to use them as human shields. They're happy to use them as human shields and to become them when it suits them, to remove those weapons and then rearm and re-prepare when the opportunity appears.
Of course, Netanyahu and his military fatigues, he's under huge political pressure, isn't he? Because his government is being blamed for the shocking breach of security that enabled the Hamas fighters to strike on October the 7th.
There has been, it's unquestionable, there have been ginormous leadership and political failures, even since the start of this war, some strategic blunders throughout. But it was interesting to see this war cabinet attempt to kind of re-establish victory on the information war, on the propaganda front, recently with this hostages situation, actually naming the potential prisoners that they would release if Hamas gave up more Israelis and joint nationals. Because that, for so long in this conflict, Israeli families have been speaking to Netanyahu, well, I say speaking to, being very aggressively towards him, saying, you have let down our families, please release them. If the Israelis say to the Palestinians, here's who we will release, those Palestinian families can then turn to Hamas and say, well, come on, why are you holding up the release of my father or my mother, even if they are a terrorist who's committed appalling atrocities inside the West Bank or Israel? This is an opportunity for the Israeli side to put that pressure on the Palestinians, on Hamas, to say, bring our families home as well.
What a complicated,
really is,
messy situation. This is not going to have any sort of resolution, Charlie, before the end of this year, at the least, is it?
No, this conflict will roll on, and I think this next phase of the conflict, this more decisive phase moving into the south, that will, there's no understanding of what the kind of post-war plan is.
That's right.
That's still so vague. That's one of those strategic blunders I was talking about. There's been no attempt to voice an explanation of what they're going to do next. And before they can even reach that, they've got the most difficult part of the conflict to come. They've sent all those civilians to the south, and now they have to somehow clear out Hamas and protect as much of that civilian infrastructure as possible. If they're going to do extreme bombing campaigns, as they did at the start, and targeted precision munitions, that's going to be an extremely delicate and, well, devastating situation.
Maintaining the international coalition supporting Israel, though, that is so far holding up well.
Yeah, well, it's two sides. It's pretty clear which one you want to be on if you're part of the law-abiding international community. Yeah. But it gets tougher to support Israeli action as the intensity of the fighting grows and the opportunity for risk to civilian life grows with it. Those 2 million in the south, the humanitarian corridor that they're being kept in that area of just 14 square kilometres is very small, okay? And it's not habitable. It's sandy areas. This is a former Bedouin camp. This is a place where people would live with tents. There are 8 refugee camps in the Gaza Strip already. The UN don't want a 9th.
Okay. We're going to be talking to the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, I believe, in just a few moments, Jake Wallace-Simons, because we want to know what he thinks about the march to the weekend, because, of course, Boris Johnson was there, which was... it was a gift for the march because, of course, everybody wants to hear what Boris Johnson has to say, and it means that we have been running it all weekend, and lots of other news organisations will run it. The significance of someone like him there can't be underestimated, can it?
Yeah, and he wasn't alone in terms of the political figures there. We also saw Robert Jenrick stood alongside, and
Immigration Minister.
Yeah, and Labour and Tory MPs actually speaking positively about each other at that event. So a sort of that cross-party unity. Which
Tom Tugendhat was there. I saw the
Security Minister, very significant presence with the Security Minister to be there, considering what we've seen about pro-terror incidents on previous demonstrations in the capital. Quite significant for him to be there.
An absence of senior Labour politicians, though.
Yeah, I think I read Peter Carr was there, Shadow Minister. But if you think of the inner circle, Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner.
Even a former Labour leader. There's nobody there.
They weren't there.
No.
But he's got a lot of difficulties, Keir Starmer, in trying to keep this coalition going because so many Labour MPs have defied his position because he won't call for a ceasefire.
Well, speaking about fragile situations, that's certainly one of them. And one of the interesting areas of work for the GB News Investigates team in the last few weeks is seeing the number of Labour councillors openly riding the central leadership, the London leadership's position, and often going a bit too far in their opposition to that position. We've seen several Labour councillors forced out of their posts as a consequence of GB News Investigates reporting on anti-Semitic cartoons, campaigning statements. And here's the thing, every time we catch them out and we share this information with the Labour Party, the Labour politician resigns and pretends they resigned a week before we found what they said.
They don't want to give you the scalp.
It doesn't work. We always call them out.
Well, one of our viewers got in touch, Paul, and he said, I watched your coverage of the demonstration in London yesterday. I was shocked, upset and very angry that not a top Labour official attended. It just shows it's all talk with them and I won't be voting for them. Keep up the good work. Thank you. OK, lots more to come this morning. You are with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.